Season 3, hi! I'm still kind of on the fence on what I personally specifically want to play. So these are all the starts that I've sort of been planning on and tinkering with. I've been like playing around with them a little bit. Not this one. This is an actual character. Whenever I'm making a build, I like setting out a skeleton, particularly with Last Epoch, because between blessings, idols, monoliths, all the new additions, which I'm not entirely sure about, like with the league mechanic, um, I don't really do all of the defenses and everything else. And I just sort of fix that later along the way, depending on like what kind of blessings I get, what do I need to fill out in terms of resistances, in terms of armor, whenever like I get a resistance, like a new armor or a new affix for like health or ward opens up. So I leave that for later. Initially, I like to just start with the skeleton of builds. This is the only one you'll see that's not like this, but we'll get back to this in a second. Let's go over to the first one that I was initially immediately playing around with, which was Hydrahedron Runemaster. Runemaster was actually the very first class I played in Last Epoch, and I love Runemaster. So the entire point of this is, it's very simple, it's very basic. You're just looking to play Hydrahedron. This is kind of broken, but we have Rune Bolts, Runic Invocation, Glyph of Dominion, Teleport, and Flame Ward. These two are defensive, and Glyph of Dominion, Runic, and Rune Bolts are going to be your main sources of damage, particularly using Hydrahedron. So how the build plays, essentially, you will mostly map with teleporting around, and teleport is good in this case because it doesn't actually add to your rune bolt counts. And then with this setup, you like rune bolt 3 times, and then you can runic invocation. And you just repeat that over and over and over. This is a build I played, like this skill set is something I played way back in 1.0. But I will say, they have nerfed ward generation a lot. A lot over the past few patches. So defensively, I am very, very skeptical to recommend this. There are like a few things that are changes. Like, I don't think running a Criterion really makes sense here. I would much rather have mana spent gained as ward. Same with here. You just want to have like mana spent gained as ward. You will be spending like a decent amount of mana and within very, very quick succession. But the whole point is you're playing with Wildfire Embers, and you are stacking Ignite chants everywhere because Ignite will be your main source of damage. So you'll Ignite. The other caveat to this is, this was confirmed by the devs to work, where whatever your Wildfire Wisps are using should be the last actual invocation you used, not the invocation casting itself. Which means you should be permanently casting Hydrahedron and not just whatever you have with your rune setup for your runic invocation. So that's the idea. You cast Hydrahedron, you rune bolt 3 times, cast Hydrahedron, and the Hydrahedron will repeat, and that will proliferate, and like you'll have another Hydrahedron, and then like it'll spread all over and it will look glorious. Right? All of that makes sense. Obviously with this, you kind of want to overcap your fire res, and it's a really nice chunk of health too. Like, the amulet is pretty good. The biggest things you look for with this build is, obviously, you're looking for Ignite chance, and you are looking for cast speed. Cast speed in particular for Runemaster is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important for the build to feel good. So I will say, if you're walking into this, huge warning, whenever you have an option and you need to decide between the few, err on the side of cast speed. And then, like, go for Ignite chance, go for increased elemental DOT wherever you can find it. But that's the basic idea of the build. I will leave all of these linked in the bottom. I'll leave my entire profile if you want, but you can look through all of them. I am mostly sure about the skills and the passives. Obviously with the gearing, like I mentioned before, the second choice is something I kind of definitely like way more. This is like, it's very unlikely that I play this, but next up is Lich, specifically Bleed Lich. Like there are so many different ways to play with Bleed that this probably isn't even like the only way to do it. But there are some very notable things that I think are shared between all of them. One is if you're playing Lich or Warlock, any kind of Acolyte, you definitely want to play Pearls of the Swine because Decrepify is incredible. It is very, very nice. You want to like have some way to cast your Decrepify. In our case, this is Chaos Bolts. So the whole point of this is don't be afraid by looking at all of these skills. You're mostly just hitting with Flay. You hit with Flay. Flay casts Chaos Bolts because of this node right here, and Chaos Bolt will cast Rip Blood. And Rip Blood has Bleed, Chaos Bolt has Bleed, and Ignite, and Flay also has some Bleed. Aura of Decay is very, very nice. I'm unsure about Aura of Decay. There's a very good chance that instead of Aura of Decay, you want to either put in Bone Curse, which our Chaos Bolt is casting. You do not have to physically cast your Bone Curse. Reaper Form is obviously mandatory, but Aura of Decay can be anything. This could also be a Death Seal. So Aura of Decay can also be a Death Seal, or it could be a Transplant. And depending on like which one you feel, if you feel like, because I play with Transplant here, but if you don't want to play with Transplant, you don't have to play with Transplants. You could just use Reap to move around, and Reap is like a pretty decent movement skill. You're going to spending all of your time in Reaper form anyway, so Reap will be available. You like the playstyle will be Reap. The nice thing about a Flay is you actually dash towards whatever you're hitting and flay them. So your mobility should, in theory, feel very, very good. This should be more than enough bleed. I think I played with even less bleed when I was playing Bleed Warlock, and this felt fine. This should arguably be better. Even on that build, I was reaching 1000 bleed very, very easily. But this should be more intensive damage, and this should be very, very good. I am very concerned about defenses. Defenses is not something I am entirely sold on for both the Runemaster build and this build. But fortunately, with the next one, I think I'm actually kind of okay with defenses, which is my Bad Ignite Warlock. So this is probably when the builds start to get a little spicier because we get to play with a Spine of Malotros. This also has like probably the simplest and kind of arguably safest playstyle. You're essentially running around with Chthonic Fissures, and then you just Chthonic Fissure. You run, you Chthonic Fissure, you can Transplant, or you can Profane Veil. There's like a lot of ways. You have options with mobility skills. I personally still like using Transplant to like lock it in. Instead of like Chaos Bolt, I just have Transplant on my hotbar. But whenever you're up against a tanky rare or a boss, you like Infernal Shade them as well, and then you just like continue casting Chthonic Fissure. And then Chthonic Fissure, Rip Blood, and Chaos Bolts will all give you your Ignite chance. And your Bleed is also converted to Ignite, so you scale both Ignite and Bleed. Something to note with Warlock is you do get overloads, and that makes it, to my mind, a little better than the Lich setups for Bleed. Which is why, like, you can make Bleed Warlock very, very good as well. I personally believe that both Bleed Warlock and Ignite Warlock will be better than their Lich counterparts, and even, like, the Runemaster counterparts. But I've already played Chthonic Fissure so much. Like, Chthonic Fissure is a very good skill, continues to be a very good skill. I don't really want to play it again. Those are there if you want spicier options, but I do believe playing Warlock for either Ignite or Bleed will just be better. I mostly want to try this out because playing with Wildfires means, in theory, your ground should be just full of Chthonic Fissures. Just everywhere. And I personally really want to see that. Which is why I want to play this build, like, a lot. A lot, a lot. Maybe you're seeing some bias towards Warlock, just because, like, Warlock has... Really, with all the ailment changes, and with all the ailment additions, specifically, Warlock kind of feels like the best in slot choice. So I'm very heavily leaning towards Warlock. Despite all of the Warlock stuff we just went through, and all of the Acolyte stuff we just went through, this is probably my pick. This is what I will league start at this moment if nothing else changes, which is Thorn's Primalist. Now, notably, there is another option to play Forge Guard instead of Primalist. I do think Primalist, with the swap options, there were several videos that I did take inspiration from for this. I think, like, Aaron, Action RPG had a good one. This is like a decidedly different build, like decidedly different league, but if I end up turning this into a video, I'll leave that linked below somewhere. But it's mostly this. Notably, he did not use Warcry and Fury Leap. I really like Warcry and Fury Leap's iframes, which is why I end up always using these whenever I'm playing Primalist. But you use a Terror's Blessing for sustain, you swap between Spriggan form and Werebear form, and then you perma-sustaining your rage, you're never worried. And this benefits from Thicket of Blinding, which is the new unique that we have this league that apparently just pumps out damage. And I am very, very, very interested in playing this. I'm leaving these blank. Obviously, with this, you can scale your Phys Res indefinitely, kind of like how I was scaling Necro Res with all of the other builds prior to this for Acolytes, and particularly with Warlock, because Bone Clamor is still like one of the best ways to have just a massive life pool. But I believe this is something I need to work on more, so I don't want to speak on this more. This is probably what I end up playing, but those are all the spicy ones. If you are unsure, if this is your first time playing and you somehow found yourself here and you're like, hey, I just want to play a good build. I just want to play a good build. I have two options for you. One is this. If it wasn't obvious, I desperately don't want to start this, but this is arguably one of the builds that benefits the most from all of the changes, which is Necro Rust stacking Chthonic Fissure Torment Warlock. What you do is you stack Necrotic Resistance, and you play Chthonic Fissure. That's it. It's very, very simple. You use all of your tree to maximize the amount of time, the duration, the damage, the Necro Rush Shred on Torment. You cast Chthonic Fissure, everything gets tormented, and then, like, in a single tick, most things will die, and then bosses will also die very, very quickly. It is Torment, you know it, you love it. Most of it functions because Necrotic Res on this build particularly gives you 2 layers of defenses and 1 layer of offense off just a single stat. So all you have to look for to make the build function is Necrotic Res on every single piece of your gear. Like, just all of your idols. And the entire reason this build is better now is because we get a T8 Primordial Affix. In our case, that's just going to be Necrotic Res. This just means we have more damage and more defenses. Bone Clamor gives us our defenses. If we go to our passives, we have this, which gives us Ward Decay Threshold per 2% Necro Res, which just means we have more ward. So we have more ward here, we have more ward here. Like, I don't actually want to limit our ward, because, like, we actually build a lot more ward to the point where we will have way more than 2x, 3x our life total. So I don't go for the low health version on this build. But all you're doing everywhere is just scaling Necrotic Resistance. And then, like, you use your blessings, you use your idols, you use, like, the other remaining affixes that I haven't touched to just build more of your resistances, more of your health, more of your ward, whatever. But every single point of necrotic resistance is so strong that you are just permanently scaling necrotic resistance. You will also want to scale curse damage. This part is very important because curse damage also scales your damage. So you want curse damage. Cast speed doesn't really matter as much here, and you want damage over time because Torment is a damage over time skill, as you can see right here. So this is save build A. I didn't play this last patch, but I played this the patch before, and in the patch before, this build was amazing. It just, you got to a point where nothing killed you, and you one-shot everything in the game. Like, Abaroth was dead in a matter of, like, a few minutes. Base Abaroth, because back then, like, Uber Abaroth was announced. If you still want a build that I can almost guarantee should be broken, this is the build I played for the race in the very most recent patch, which is Smite Void Knight, not Paladin. So this is literally my character being imported from the end of the race onto this. These are the exact same skills. I have a full video on this on the channel, so you can just refer to that. I'll leave that link below. But all you're really doing is playing Smites. And the biggest benefit to this is instead of having Vitality here, you can have Vitality as a primordial affix, so you just have way more Vitality. Notably with this build, Vitality might not even be the best option anymore, because Vitality, with the whole point of Vitality in this build in particular, is it's both your flat damage and your health. But that doesn't actually matter as much anymore. Or it does. It's obviously one of the most important stats. However, we have things like void damage. In fact, we have a lot of void damage. With the potential of, like, having as much spell void damage as Vitality and also having up to 330% increased void damage. So this is another option that you have in lieu of just having Vitality. The biggest thing with this build is you want to stack as much cast speed as possible in all of your gear. These gloves are broken. You just want cast speed on it. And once you have enough cast speed, you will have so much base crit chance that you only need one T7 or 2 T6 spell crit chances anywhere, and you will be crit capped. So the biggest thing with this is every single time you're casting Smite, you have 2 layers of Smite potential repeating. One is Pillars of Light, and the other is, well, you're playing Void Knight, so you have Echo Chance. So every single bit of cast speed kind of has a win-more condition, where the more you're casting, and you end up casting more, because, like, you're just casting off of triggers. And you can, like, just reach absurd damage numbers eventually. I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else left.